On the 12th of November 1955, a farmer in western Pennsylvania stopped to watch a groundhog vanish into a hole at the base of a cliff. He knelt down and pushed his hand into the loose dirt the animal had thrown out. What came up was burnt bone. Beneath that hole was a fire pit that had gone cold while ice sheets still sat on Canada. And for the next 50 years, American archaeology would tear itself apart arguing about it. The farmer's name was Albert Miller. His family had owned that land since 1795. Hundreds of acres of rolling farm country near the village of Avella in Washington County. At the edge of it stood a sandstone overhang above a creek, a natural stone awning, exactly the kind of place he had always suspected people had sheltered under. That day, the groundhog proved him right. Digging down about 12 inches, Miller pulled out flint flakes, freshwater mussel shells, burnt bone, and an intact flint knife. Then he did something almost nobody does. He filled the hole back in, not for a season, for 18 years. He was terrified of looters, and he refused to let anyone put a shovel in that ground until he found a professional he could trust. I have to stop on that for a moment. 18 years. I don't know many people who could find something that important and sit on it quietly, and he did it for one reason. He was more frightened of losing the sight than he was of being ignored. He had no way of knowing that the thing he was protecting would end up on the front page of the Washington Post and would drag him into the ugliest fight in his country's science. In the spring of 1973, a 29-year-old new faculty member at the University of Pittsburgh named James Adovasio was looking for somewhere to run a student field school. A local historian mentioned a farmer with a rock shelter. Adovasio drove out, looked at Miller's flint knife, and asked permission to dig that summer. Nobody expected anything. Field schools are teaching exercises. Students learn how to hold a trowel. Then the students kept going down and down. The deposits under that overhang were not a few feet deep. They were layered like the pages of a book, one occupation stacked on another, and every layer they lifted carried them further back. The first radiocarbon results arrived from the Smithsonian Laboratory while the second season was still underway. On August 4th, 1974, the numbers made the front page of the Washington Post, because at that moment every textbook in America agreed on one thing. The first people to reach this continent were the Clovis hunters, who arrived roughly 13,000 years ago, carrying a distinctive fluted spear point. That was not a theory, that was the rule. And the charcoal from the bottom of Albert Miller's groundhog hole was older. Over the following years, the excavation became one of the most meticulous ever conducted in North America. The team recovered more than 20,000 artifacts, around 150 separate fire pits, and close to 1 million animal bones. They found a slender, unfluted spear point that matched nothing in the Clovis toolkit, and they named it the Miller Lanceolate, after the farmer. And they built a chronology that is still, half a century later, genuinely hard to argue with. 52 radiocarbon dates, running in almost perfect order, oldest at the bottom, youngest at the top. When I first read through that sequence, I remember assuming it had to be the end of the argument. 52 dates, all of them in order. It was not the end, it was barely the beginning, because then came the response, and it was merciless. Leading it was Vance Haynes, the geologist who had spent his career taking apart early man claims across the American West. Haynes did not accuse anyone of lying. He said the ground itself had lied to them. Western Pennsylvania is coal country. Coal is carbon so ancient that it contains no measurable radiocarbon at all. If even a trace of it had washed into those charcoal samples through groundwater, every date at the bottom of that hole would read far older than the truth. And then came a second objection, and it was worse. If people were camped under that overhang 16,000 years ago, they were sitting roughly 50 miles from the edge of an ice sheet a mile thick. The plants and animals around their fire should have been spruce and tundra, caribou and mammoth. They were not. They were white-tailed deer, squirrel, oak and hickory. A temperate forest, the wrong world entirely. Adovasio spent the next 30 years answering. Samples went to Oxford for accelerator mass spectrometry, a far more precise method, and the old dates held. An independent geomorphologist examined the sediments for any trace of groundwater moving through them and found none. Adovasio pointed to a chalky mineral crust left behind by mollusk shells. intact right across the shelter, and argued that serious seepage would have dissolved it away. The critics came back with the chemistry of the humates in the charcoal. The argument never fully closed. So Adovasio did something unusual for a man accused of overreaching. He became more cautious. In 1990, he and his colleagues published a chronology, claiming only this, that people were present in southwestern Pennsylvania by 14,000 to 14,500 years ago. Not an outrageous number, just an impossible one, under the rules of the time. I think about that choice a lot. He was holding the most explosive site in the country, and he deliberately claimed less than he could have. That is not what someone does when they are chasing a headline. And then the rules changed. In 1997, a delegation of the field's most senior skeptics travelled to a waterlogged site in southern Chile called Monte Verde, examined it with their own hands, and publicly conceded that it was older than Clovis. The wall came down. Since then, the evidence has stacked up across 2 continents. In a dried lake bed in New Mexico, human footprints were dated by 4 independent methods to more than 20,000 years ago. Meadowcroft was not the outlier anymore. The discipline had simply taken 50 years to walk to the spot where a Pennsylvania farmer had been standing since 1955. In 2005, the Rockshelter was named a National Historic Landmark. You can visit it, stand on a platform above the excavation, and look straight down into the hole. The groundhog got a name too. The staff call him Rocky, and he is the site's unofficial mascot, an animal who dug into one of the oldest human sites in North America, threw the evidence out behind him, and wandered off without ever knowing. What stays with me about Meadowcroft is not the dates. It is that the whole thing turned on a farmer who decided to wait, and an animal that had no idea what it was doing. Somewhere out there, under a field, under a road, under someone's back garden. The next one is still waiting for something to dig in exactly the right place. If you found this fascinating, hit subscribe for more stories like this. Thanks for watching.